The Queen's coronation in 1953 was one of the landmark events of the 20th century. And I love the images of all these kind of families and neighbours all huddling around little TV sets just to catch a glimpse of Elizabeth taking her throne. And there's a bit of the ceremony that I think a lot of people have probably forgotten now, but it's when amidst all the glitz and the glamour, the gold, the jewels and precious state treasures, in the midst of all of that, the Bishop of London handed the Queen a Bible. And as he handed it to her, he said, "We present you with this book, the most valuable thing this world affords." Jump forward a few decades to slightly more humble surroundings, and you'd find me and all my schoolmates sat in a school assembly, also being given a Bible. It was one of these little red New Testament and Psalms Bibles. And rather than it be some cherished possession that everyone was so grateful to have received, a lot of people left their Bible behind. I saw a couple of people chuck it in the bin, and I noticed someone who'd actually wedged one under a door just to prop it open. And that's the crazy thing about this book, the Bible. To some people, it's the most treasured and valuable possession, whereas to others, it's not even worth the paper it's printed on. When we try and look at what the Bible is, it doesn't really give us too much room for sitting on the fence, because it claims to point us to the meaning of life. So we kind of have this decision of either rejecting it or taking what it has to say pretty seriously. The problem with trying to get answers on this is that for a lot of people, opinions seem to be based on misconceptions and misinformation. Having chatted with Christian and non-Christian friends, what I found is there seems to be three main areas that people have contention and disagreement. First of all, it's the historical accuracy of the Bible. Secondly, the contradictions it contains. And thirdly, the relevancy to our lives. So firstly, is the Bible historically accurate? Well, before we look at that, it can be helpful just to be clear of what the Bible really is, because it's a completely unique book. In fact, technically, it's not even a book. It's a collection of ancient materials. You've got legal documents, you've got poetry and songs, proverbs, you've got biographies, letters. So it's a real collection, and it was written over about 1,500 years by around 40 different authors, ranging from kings to prophets to doctors to fishermen and shepherds. And so when we're looking at the historical accuracy, what we really need to see is whether or not the Bible lines up with history. Because a lot of people say they can't trust the Bible because it's out of line with what they see from historical findings. So, how does the Bible match up with history of the time? Well, when we look at the research, what we see is that both contemporary historians and archaeological findings actually match up with a lot of the information given in the Bible. For example, if you want to look at the life of Jesus, we've got historians, Roman historians like Tacitus or Pliny, or the Jewish historian Josephus, all of whom talk about the life of Jesus and his followers. And the history actually given in the Bible is extremely detailed and specific in many places. So for example, the account of Jesus' life by Luke, the detail in there is so great that historian and archaeologist Walter Ramsay would say that not only is it trustworthy, but Luke, the author, should be placed amongst the greatest of historians. Now, of course, none of that means that the Bible's claims are actually true, but it does show us something about the reliability of the source. A lot of people would say that they can't trust the Bible because it's full of contradictions. It says one thing in one place and something different in another. And I can completely understand that, because when I first started reading the Bible, there are certain things that I'd read and I think, wait, surely they clash. But as I started to discover and study and research the Bible more, what I began to realize is the importance of understanding the context, the theological context, the historical context, the literary context. Because you can see things in the Bible that won't make sense until you understand a bit more of the bigger picture. Take, for example, In one place in the Old Testament, kind of in the beginning of the Bible, God says to his people, show your enemies no mercy. For this period of time, this evil, terrible people who are doing these disgusting things like sacrificing children, I want you to show them no mercy. Then jump forward to later in the story, to the New Testament, where Jesus says to his followers, love your enemies. And that's what we live by now. And those two themes could seem like a real clash if we're unaware of what's gone on in the hundreds of years between. Maybe a good illustration of this would be from the life of this man, Nelson Mandela. So at his trial in 1964, he said, we feel that violence is necessary to overcome the white suppressor. But then jump forward a few decades, jump forward 26 years, and he would say, violence will never build a nation. Now, those two statements could seem completely at odds and seem completely confusing unless you understand a bit of the history of South Africa and all that's gone on in between. And it's a bit like that in the Bible. When we're aware of the context, the overarching narrative, the big picture, we can piece together the different things that otherwise may confuse us. And finally, a lot of people would say they don't really want to ever read the Bible because it has no relevance to our modern day lives. I mean, how could a book written thousands of years ago be applicable to you and me right now? And I'll be honest with you, I've read the whole book, I've read the whole Bible, and frankly, there are some bits in there that are just a little bit weird and odd and abstract and sometimes a bit dull. And yeah, when you know a bit more about the kind of narrative and the context and where they fit in specifically, you can appreciate and value why it's been put in there. But it can still be really hard work to read. The Bible, though, is a really big book, and it says something profound on almost every area of life, whether it be money or sex or happiness or sorrow, every high and low in the human existence. And even in my own life, even though these stories may have been written thousands of years ago, what I've seen is ultimately people are people. And I had an experience recently where I was in a really complex and painful situation and I wasn't sure what to do. But through reading the story of David, I had real wisdom and insight in what I should respond with and how I could move on without being bitter or broken. It was almost like the words written on the page, no matter the fact they'd been written so long ago, they just popped off the page and spoke right into my life. But ultimately, when we really drill down to the core, the Bible's purpose isn't to be primarily a moral manual for life. As much as it shows us how to live, the primary objective of the Bible is to point us towards its central character. And its central character whom the whole narrative, the whole story hangs upon, the crux of the story, and its central character is Jesus. And through piecing together history from outside the Bible and within it, we learn so much about this incredible man, a man like no other. In fact, not just a man, but God come down to earth, fully human, yet fully divine. And through his life and teachings, we get an image of what God is like, his compassion, his justice, his mercy, his love. And through his death, we see that the punishment for all the wrong stuff, all the wrongdoing, the sin we've done has been paid for. It's been taken away once and for all. And in his resurrection, we see that the chain and the power of death has been completely broken, that we can live lives full of hope and peace and joy, and lives that continue beyond this one here on earth. At the end of the day, you've got to make your own decision. But if I could give you any piece of advice, it would be this. One of the best things I ever did was investigate Jesus' claims for myself. So if you've never done that, I'd really encourage you to read one of the gospel accounts of Jesus' life, whether it be Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Take some time to really digest Jesus' life and his teachings. You've got to come to your own conclusions. But if your experience is anything like mine, not only will the words ring true, but they'll be completely and utterly life-changing.